For some time now, increasingly so, I am being made aware of the inability for many people to retain information. And I think lots of us would have seen this, would have experienced it in other people, and probably you experience it yourselves. Now, it's always been a curious thing for me, because from a very young age it appears that I always had a good memory. And there were instances with my family members, brothers and sisters, where I would recite things that I'd read in a book, or words of a song, and memories, and all different sorts of things like that, which suitably impressed my siblings because they simply couldn't do it. And I was always like, well, you don't remember this, or why is it that you can't remember the words to that song? And in recent times, when I'm speaking with people and going out on my philosophical walks with friends and acquaintances, we would be watching the same videos and would say, let's speak about them when we meet. And then when we meet, I would say things like, well, so give me your hypothesis, or, you know, convey what that video meant to you. And invariably, mostly they wouldn't be able to do that. And if they could do it a little bit, it was only a little bit. And I would say, well, don't you remember X, Y and Z? And they didn't. And I would say, well, you watched the video last night, and yet you've forgotten about it this morning. And then some friends would feel quite affronted about that, and then I would reel off almost word for word what was said, and what I took from any video, and the points I want to make and discuss. And then I'm saying, well, do you remember this, and what about that? And then the friends would go, go on, and I'm like, goodness me, you don't remember, do you? You just don't remember. And so I look into that and I think, well, why is that so prolific these days? And one of the earliest conclusions that I drew, I think even before I had my spiritual awakening, was that the rest of my family members, they had these inoculations when they were about 12 years old, is it? You have this big thick syringe which goes into your arm there and leaves, you know, a scar about 1/3 of an inch. Well, my brothers and sisters had that, and for some reason I never had it. I remember categorically the letter coming from the school, do you want Aaron to have this thing? And my old man went, no. And so why didn't he do that with my brothers and sisters? I have no idea. Maybe it was my destiny. I wasn't destined to have that. Now, what I can say about my brothers and sisters, they all suffer from anxiety. They have all had illnesses pertaining to anxiety. The two sisters have both been on psychotropics. My elder brother, he wouldn't ever take psychotropics, but he's had alopecia and psoriasis for many years, patches of red itchy skin all over his body, his hair falling out, going here and there, and a deep level of stress. And they could never remember anything, and they couldn't really think straight. And when questioned or you know, when I query certain things, then they become affronted due to some sort of energy building up which rejects the fact that someone is inquiring and they can't find whatever it is that I'm inquiring into. And this has been the source and root of many falling out within my family. Because they simply will not be probed. They seem to have the inability to look within. And so I am concluding that it's got a lot to do with that stuff. Now, all of my brothers and sisters have had many fillings in their teeth where I haven't had a single one. Never in my life have I had a filling. In the old days, they used to have these fillings with a high lead content, didn't they? And so, obviously, that was an issue which they no longer use. But I'm positive that these things that they are injecting into people are responsible for lots of the failings of the human being. And when we look around society today, it is becoming increasingly worse and worse. And autism is increasing massively, and it's been increasing since certain advents, which I can't speak about now, but I'm assuming you'll know, and if you don't know, then look into it. And people like Robert Kennedy Jr. have been investigating this for a long time and got all different sorts of information on that. But suffice it to say, people are not managing to retain information. Their minds are becoming more and more like goldfish, and this is why it is becoming the exception rather than the rule for people to be able to articulate, to be able to remember, to be able to solve problems, to be able to follow a lineage of a debate and a conversation without getting irate and emotionally embroiled and projecting biases and all that different sorts of stuff. Where is the clear thinking mind these days? So the previous video I put up was Alex O'Connor from his YouTube channel Within Reason, and when you watch him debate, he has the greatest of patience, and he tries to engage and he tries to engage and he tries to engage, and lots of people, they won't allow him to. And so the recent video I watched with him, he was interviewing Peter Hitchens, and Peter Hitchens was obnoxious and dismissive and overbearing, and barely gave Alex a moment to present a new question to him. And Alex just sat there with the greatest of respect and patience. Where do we get this from? How do we acquire it? How do we learn to do it? Or is it something that we are blessed with? Some people, maybe. I don't think it's necessarily a blessing. I think it's an acquisition that we learn to be able to do this because we have greater insight from most people, and we see how they're being triggered and how they are being manipulated by their biases and by varying rogue energies within them. Attachments, spiritual attachments, people that have just got to keep firing some sort of venom or contradiction or disinformation or whatever. There's a lot of people that I consider that actually do have possessions. And in my book I write about when I knew that I had certain possessions, and I write about how we can get rid of them. I write about how we can see them among our peers, and we can see even these entities which possess a person leapfrogging from person to person. Literally we can see that and feel that within the room. I don't mean see it physically, we can see it by the reactions of people. And for instance, look, you get somebody walk into the room with a vile energy because they have a negative attachment, and then they start engaging with the other people in the room, and this energy then seems to leapfrog onto the others, and they become a mirror image of this energy. What's going on there? Where is the ability just to go, wow, that person's got serious negative energy. Ooh, let's just be calm. Let's just be calm. Let's not get embroiled in this. Let's not be a mirror image of what this person's projecting. But most people, they don't seem to have the capacity to be able to realise and recognise and think in certain ways. And so many of you, the viewers, you tell me that you have the greatest of issues retaining what I'm saying. And granted, I say a lot of things over, let's say, a period of 45 minutes in one of my, reasonable monologues. And I speak about lots of varying subject matter. And of course, as a person which is very versed in lots of things and been involved in this stuff for the past 15 years, exceedingly prolifically read and hundreds of thousands of hours of YouTube consumption. And so my mind retains the vast majority of this information. As to why it does that, I have no idea. And of course, I can recall it in an instant. And I don't lay claim to having any special ability which I have fashioned myself. The ability, other than it being natural, which it evidently was, has been enhanced by my 15 years of dedicated meditation, because the meditation enables one to clear one's mind completely. And when you can do this, then your mind is nurtured and has a greater ability to be able to retrieve information. Now, when we are stressed, people, we cannot retain information because our mind is too busy in fight or flight to bother with retaining information. It's only bothered in defending itself at that moment in time. Fight or flight, it's engaged in those two options. And so it isn't listening, it isn't observing, it isn't absorbing, it's just feeling that there's a danger and wants to extricate itself from the danger. Now, when our minds are calm, then we can listen very acutely. We can feel a person's vibration and energy, and we can absorb the information. We have the time and the calmness to be able to archive all this information, and then our minds, over a period of time, like the defrag in a computer, will allocate all the information to the relevant departments. And then when our minds are looking to retrieve certain information, the neuropaths are very distinct, and they're very efficient, and they go to the exact places. Now, when I'm walking and talking, I've got no idea what I'm going to be speaking about, and yet I can just pick so eclectically from so many different subjects, and I will recall my linguistic ability, the circuitry within my mind evidently is very, very efficient, because these paths are well worn. It's like watching rabbit runs in a field, in a meadow. You can see where the rabbits have run 100 times or more, and this is what happens in our minds. But if our minds are under threat all the time, with cortisol dripping through them, and are in a constant state of angst, then they don't store the information, and they most certainly can't retrieve the information. And so this is what I reckon is going on today. The vast majority of people are under such duress that they don't have any stored information because they've been under duress for so long, and that's why they can't recall anything, and they can't put A with B and come up with C, and because they're under duress, they don't absorb any more information. So people are literally becoming airheads. They are becoming automated husks. There is nothing inside. And so in recent times, I'm saying to people, for goodness sakes, no one of you wants to come and speak about my book. There's 75 of you in possession of my book. How many of you have actually managed to get through it? How many of you have something to say about it? And it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I'm stupefied. I'm I'm shocked to the core to look that only yesterday I put another reminder up. For those of you that have read the book, please, put a review up on Amazon. Come talk to me about it. There must be something in there. There's so many subjects in there. There's 300 sub-chapters in that book. There's an enormous amount of information, and so some of it must struck you to the core. But how many of you could relay what you have read or felt about that? How many of you have had similar encounters? I don't know. I would have thought if any of you had, then you would have been bursting with some sort of anticipation to want to speak about it, to gain some sort of catharsis by getting it out there, But no, it's very curious. And so in many of my videos I bluster that I must be genius because it's been evident for a long, long time that there's something very, very different with people like me to most people. And so this is why I have to search long and hard to find somebody which is similar to me on the internet. I can't find these people in everyday world, and granted I don't mix a great deal, but in my life, as I recall speaking to a lot of people, whenever I probe or ask any questions, people just do not know. Or they have a firewall which prevents one from passing because they're terrified of allowing a question to penetrate. It's like their shadow is so enormous, it's grown so obese that the vast majority of what they are as a psychical being is premised in the shadow. Everything is in the shadow, not to be revealed, not to be tampered with, not to be looked at, not to be questioned. And no, it's far too terrifying. And, it's astounding. It really is astounding. But then when I listen to people like Alex O'Connor, I'm like, wow, this guy, he hasn't been polluted or his mind constrained. He seems to have a perfectly functioning, brilliant brain, which in the old days I would think would have been and appeared to have been quite normal. But now increasingly we know that there's something very, very sinister happening, because people are literally dropping like flies, and to hold a wholesome, intellectual, respectful, intelligent conversation is something that is very, very far and few between. So I'm actually going to try to see if I can contact Alex and send him my book, because I'm pretty sure if he read my book, then it might most certainly trigger certain levels of inquiry within his mind as to how one attains or acquires certain spiritual experiences, because I tell it in the most graphic of detail how these things came about. It's not like I was seeking anything. It's not like I was going to seances, or I was involved in witchcraft, or I, was a Satanist, and I was worshipping demons and all this different sorts of stuff. I've never been involved in any of that, people. But spiritual experiences and encounters have just arisen within me, and so this is why I'm like, well, why me? What is it about me that I should be privy to many of these supernatural experiences when people are even lucky to have one in their lives? And I remember them all in the most graphic of detail, and I can still recount them to this day, and I can feel the energies, each and every one of them. And in my book I speak about the great difference of the energy when I encountered Jehovah to when I encountered Jesus. They both were offering me a variety of love, but the variety of love was tangibly different. Jehovah's love was as you would expect from the Old Testament. It was conditional, and there was a powerful threatening energy pertaining to it, whereas the love from Jesus was absolutely unconditional. There wasn't any threat, there was no connotations whatsoever. It was just an offer of unconditional love, and to feel both of those things is incredible. Then to feel the energy of a demon or Satan, whatever you want to call it, a very, very sinister, depleting energy. Ultimately terrifying. If people had such possessions which they couldn't escape, then you could only, I don't know what you could hope for, what you could pray for. Emancipation. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful that some of you have allowed me to be privy to your seeming lack of absorption, retention of information. You stated that you've been reading the book, but don't seem to be retaining any of it, and so couldn't possibly speak about any of it. I have a solution. I do have a solution, people. And one of the solutions is that you need to become emancipated from all of the energy vampires in your life. Now, energy vampires could be friends, partners, colleagues, all those sort of people that drain your energy and constrict your freedoms within. The amount of time you spend doing things that you just simply don't want to do, the amount of conflict that you have in your mind from family members and friends and business colleagues or whatever. How do we emancipate ourselves from that? Well, you have to eradicate these things. And if you listen to spiritual people, they will tell you, well, the first thing that happens when we become spiritually awoken, that we have a radical change around in the people that we associate ourselves with, because many people will be absolutely toxic to our newfound spiritual vibration and the way in which we see the world, and they will seriously resent the way we are feeling, talking and being, because they notice changes in us. They don't like that at all, they resent it, and they will penalise us and punish you and be punitive and all different sorts of things. So many people you just have to walk away from. Don't engage in the conflict, just walk away. And I've done this with certain family members, but some of them are absolutely persistent and keep wanting to try to get back what was once considered to be theirs. The ownership they had with me, being the person prior to waking up. Well, that person's dead. That person doesn't exist anymore, and I have told certain people that the person they are looking for no longer exists. So please cease from that quest, because all that's going to happen is you're going to resent me, this thing, more and more, and that's proven to be the case. People don't understand it, of course. They don't know where you are. They don't know where you've gone. And so the other option, other than eradicating all of these negative energies, is to enter within and to take up a meditation practice and make sure you're doing it correctly. And the correct procedure is to empty the mind. When we meditate, it isn't about concentrating on anything. It's about non-concentration. It's about the complete rest and eradication of the ego. We just let the ego melt away. We try to dissolve the ego And when we can actually do that, then we emancipate ourselves from it, and we enter into the clarity of a still and pure mind. And that is a beautiful thing. And then, of course, the mind becomes more and more nurtured and more able to do what it's naturally given to doing, and that's to thinking and problem solving and absorbing and remembering and all these different sorts of things, which we can't do when the mind is full, when the brain is full of cortisol, and we've got a billion things to do which distract us all the time. So this is why we have to retreat, and this is why, you know, retreats are so popular. People pay £2,000 a weekend just to go and sit in a tent with somebody that's going to give them nothing. But the whole thing about the retreat is that we retreat inside, and these retreats where you have to travel and mix with, you know, 100 or 1,000 people, you know, are defeating the object. The whole thing about a retreat is that we retreat, for God's sake, into our own minds and our own consciousness, and we block out and eradicate everything else. So just sit in a room in peace. Well, that's what a retreat is, people. But you see, people, they can't do that. They also need somebody to hold their hand. They need somebody to tell them what to do. They need to keep their mind active. Oh, what shall I do, Mr. Guru? Should I do this or should I do that? Look, it's simple. You just sit down and shut the fuck up. And if you can sit down in a chair for half an hour, then that will be very, very much of an accomplishment, I'm sure. If you can sit down for an hour or two, just relaxing and not thinking about anything, just staring out the window, just observing, then you're on your way to emancipating your afflicted mind. And so this is the state of the world, people. It is an absolute contrivance. The powers that be know what they're doing by keeping you distracted and busy all the time, because they don't want you in this state whereby you are going to awaken and you're going to see the world with the greatest of clarity, because you will then know what they're doing. And then, like me, you won't be any compliance with it. And then you'll be making videos and telling other people. That's the last thing they want. So they want to keep everybody terrified. They want to keep the cortisol flowing through people's brains. They want to keep them in a state of anxiety and with airheads, which they just feed them this repetition and this nonsense on a constant basis. And the reason why they have to do it on a constant basis is because people forget from one day to the next. And so they need it drip fed, they need it drip fed, they need it drip fed, on and on and on. That's how it goes. And what these people do, they just manipulate you. It's like a Hansel and Gretel trail. They just keep dropping you a crumb for you to follow, and then when you're lost the next day because you can't see another crumb, they'll drop you another crumb, and that then appears to give people purpose and a reason for their existence. And they think momentarily in their goldfish-like minds that they are engaged in something, they've got something to do, but as soon as you take the breadcrumb away, then they're lost and they become insecure, terrified. And so that's the state of the human race, people. So I get it that you don't respond to what I'm saying, because it's vastly out of the capability of most people, unfortunately, these days. So I will appeal to you again. For those of you that recognise that within yourselves, then I will appreciate that, and I'm sure other people would appreciate knowing that there's other people like them around. If you are one of the fortunate ones and you have managed to extricate yourselves advertently, inadvertently, however you've done it, then I'd like to hear from you also. People that can read a whole book, just sit down and read for several hours and retain the information. And not only do you actually read the book, most people, you see, they just read the words, they just acknowledge the words, but they don't absorb the words, they don't contemplate the words, they don't query the words, they don't ask what actually is being said. What do I feel? What do I compile? What am I collating here? They're just reading words, 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 words. And one person who read my book in its entirety, I think read it in 3 or 4 days, but the only thing that he saw from the book was what he was looking for. And he was just looking for evil, because that was his thing. He was looking for anything which pertained to the topic of evil, any indication of evil, because he reckoned that the whole world was evil, and that's all there was. But, you know, in my estimation, he was creating his own evil by seeking it out in any given avenue, in the most obscurest of places, just projecting onto anything as being evil. Well, you know, we all create our own reality, and there's lots of people out there which would have a great adherence to any particular god, and they would consider that God is responsible for everything, and, you know, if God's doing everything, then it's all good, and so it's all benevolent, and so they create their reality in that realm. You see how it is. So in that video that I just put up about Alex O'Connor, he said, well, look, you know, here's the thing that I've got an issue with. In, let's say, certain places in the world, like Asia, where you've got 95% Buddhists, that particular ideology comes about because these people are born into that existing ideology. And then you've got people in the Middle East, they are born into the realm of Islam, and they seem to have Islam dripping through their brains and their veins, and so we go, well, look, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it, that, you know, the chances are when you're born into one of these particular nations, then you're going to be indoctrinated from the get-go. That's how your particular god is going to be running through your veins. It's just like the cuisine that you eat and the societal norms and everything. It becomes a part of you, and so that's a simple no-brainer that these religious people don't seem to be able to grasp. Because if you said to a Muslim, you know, can you not see that if you were born, let's say, in one of these Western secular countries, then the chances are you'd be an atheist, or you'd be a Christian, which is the sort of fundamental underpinning of the Western nations. You wouldn't be a Muslim, but Allah, you know, and you know, all sorts of things would hit the fucking fan, wouldn't they? But this is what I'm saying, people. People's minds have been hijacked, and most people's minds have been hijacked from a very young age, and their cognition has been killed. It has actually been placed on the altar, and it's been sacrificed to whatever deity they have been born under. And unfortunately, most people never really escape from that. Now, one final thing on this is most of us will be aware of Catholics, people born into Catholicism, and then they manage to extricate themselves somehow when they get older, because they realise how overpowering, overbearing, stifling it is, and so they extricate themselves and they enjoy a more secular mind, but they hold the greatest of resentment because they know that deep down they still have an attachment to that energy, because it was stitched into their very soul when they were growing up. And although they can see now with some sort of clarity the fiction of it, the propaganda, there's still a residue of it, and this brings about the greatest of resentment for how these cults have poisoned people's minds. Wow. is it any wonder the world's in a mess? And for people such as myself who see things with such clarity, and you see millions of people all around that just don't get it, and they will fight tooth and nail, and they will argue endlessly, defending something which is just ridiculous. You know, in this video I showed you with Alex O'Connell, he was debating a Christian, and I watched him debate another Christian last night, and these Christians all come from the same premise, that they just desperately want to believe, and ultimately that's all it boils down to. But they will never say that. They will never have a level of integrity and just say, I just desperately want to believe that there is a God and he loves me and I'm going somewhere when I die. The thought of anything else terrifies me. No, they say, oh, this means this and this proves this, and they clutch at straws, and they build up you know, mountains out of molehills, and it really is pathetic to watch. And intelligent people watch these debates and go, well, this is clear as day that you're just an indoctrinated, desperate fool. You've got no substance for your religion at all, save that you want to believe that. And when I was acquainted with lots of so-called Christians, I would be posing questions to them. Well, what do you premise your faith on? Have you actually had any religious experiences? Have you had any spiritual experiences? Do you have any substance which told you intuitively, vitally, that there is a deity, and you know, he loves you, he wants the best for you, or whatever? And I used to say to them, well, you know, I've had a dozen, and I can reel off every single one of them, and yet I still haven't become a blind believer. I'm questioning what these experiences were all about, and I will never stop questioning. But these people had the blind belief and faith even before they had one of these experiences. And so I'm saying, well, look, you proclaim to believe and have faith in this God, and I'm saying to you, well, I know there's something going on, and I can tell you that my encounters with Jehovah, Jesus and Satan and angels and all the rest of it, and yet you don't have any of those. And yet you're a believer, I've had those, and I'm not a believer. What's going on? Because what is belief? It's not knowledge, is it? And I'm looking for knowledge. And so I'm just waiting for more of these supernatural encounters to give me more knowledge, so I can assess what I have encountered and premise my assessment on actual experience instead of blind faith, belief, desire and hope. Anyway, people, enough said, because I realised that the ability to retain what I've said, even in this video, for many of you, is quite overwhelming. So, what do you have to say about that?